Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody hear me well? Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. So I thank the Yasin Foundation, the Belmont Masjid, for their hospitality. And they've arranged a series of talks. Most of them, at least better than half of them, have to do with the subject of end times, the last days. We're not talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah, the end of history, the last age. And the motivation for these talks come from my own observation that this subject is neither learned nor taught nor discussed. I've been around in this area for 3 decades, but more than that in this country for 35 years. And I think if I recollect right, there were less than 5 khutbahs on Fridays when I heard this subject, for example, the subject of Dajjal, being mentioned. And when it was mentioned, it was merely peripheral, not as a subject that was taught or expounded. So out of that curiosity came some study. And so inshallah, tonight's topic with respect to the end of history is about Ya'juj and Ma'juj, understanding Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And first, a note of attribution. The principal source of information that came for this particular talk that we'll hear is from a book entitled An Islamic View of Gog and Magog by Sheikh Imran Hosein. So that's the principal source of information. But of course, we rely on the Quran and Hadith also. So tonight, inshallah, we'll try to tackle some basic questions. Our method will be very simple. We take basic questions and try to get an understanding of this subject through these basic questions. For example, who are Ya'juj and Ma'juj? That's one question, right? Where do they come from? Second question, what are their characteristics? And the big question that everybody thinks about, have they been released yet? And can we recognize them? Is it good enough? Use this one. Khalas, inshallah. Should I shut this off? Okay. And is this better now? And what are the characteristics and can we recognize them? And addressing these questions, we'll follow a particular methodology. And in this methodology, the Quran remains our most unshakable reference, the solid reference, the principal reference. Everything else is secondary. And in order to understand or expand our knowledge, we'll go to Hadith and we'll take the Hadith which are in harmony with Quran. And we say this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken upon himself the responsibility of preserving Quran. And no such guarantee extends to ahadith, let alone the tafasir or seerah or even history, right? So the guarantee extends to Quran for its integrity to be maintained, its preservation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken up the responsibility upon himself. So the words Ya'juj and Ma'juj are 2 Arabic names. They come from a root word or root derived from 3 letters, J, which is Hamza, Jim, Jim. Okay. This forms the root. Other than these 2 names in the Quran, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the only other mention of a word which is derived from this root, Hamza, Jim, Jim, is to describe the burning taste of salt water. Burning taste of seawater, salt water, also translated as rising salt, as in milhun ujaj. To the best of our knowledge, milh is salt. And to the best of our knowledge, we do not know of any other word in Quran that has been derived from this particular root. So inshallah, we'll begin our study. The Quran mentions Ya'juj and Ma'juj in 2 places. Okay. Once in Surah Al-Kahf. And there is a strong linkage between the end of history, the last stage, and Surah Al-Kahf. Who made this linkage? Prophet ﷺ made this linkage between Surah Al-Kahf and end times. He said, if you want to stay safe from the fitna of Dajjal, recite the first 10 verses. And another narration, the last 10 verses. And another hadith, you recite once a week on Jummah to stay safe from the fitna of Dajjal. So this is the linkage. The second mention is in Surah Al-Anbiya. And inshallah we'll come to both the mentions during the course of this talk. But let's take the historical background of the mention of Ya'juj and Ma'juj in Surah Al-Kahf. At the time, 1450 years ago, approximately, Quraysh in Mecca had a challenge. Their system, their political, economic, social order was being challenged by a man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who claimed to be a prophet. And he said, all humans are equal in the sight of Allah, just like the teeth of a comb. He denounced oppression. He denounced domination of the weak by the strong. And he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the God, Lord of all, Arab, non-Arab, free as well as enslaved. So this was a challenge to a system, and no system likes a challenge. They tried many things. They tried to buy him off. We know the history, but we're not going to get into that part, right? We know from the Sirah. They tried many things. These things did not work, so they caucused together, got together for a meeting. And someone suggested, he's claiming to be a prophet. Let's go and ask the Jews in Medina. Jews have a significant presence in Medina, and they have a lot of experience with prophets. And we know they have a lot of experience with prophets, right? Rasulullah ﷺ told us that between Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Isa, there was never a time when the Banu Israel were left without a prophet. There was always prophets among them, sometimes multiple prophets at any given time. So and they wanted to get this validated, whether he's a true prophet or not, by asking the wise people of the Jewish community in Medina, even though they themselves had given him the title, Prophet ﷺ, they give him the title of As-Sadiq al-Amin. They knew he was very truthful. I mean, when he claims he's a prophet, he must be a prophet. But they wanted to validate this from rabbis in Jerusalem. So a delegation was dispatched to, in Medina, was dispatched to Medina, and they asked the rabbis, we have this person who's claiming to be a prophet. How can we tell that he's truly a prophet? The rabbi said, ask him 3 questions. If he can answer them correctly, then follow him, he's a prophet. But if he cannot, then do what you have to do with him, right? So they identified 3 questions, so we're not going to go into in the right order, but the 3 questions are as follows. He said, asking about the young men who disappeared in the ancient times, because they have a fabulous story to tell, a marvelous story to tell. Question 2, asking about the mighty travel who traveled to the confines of east and west, that means 2 ends of the earth, east end of the earth and west end of the earth, or what appears like the ends of the earth. That mighty travel, asking about those 2 journeys. And third question was ask him about the ruh. Okay. If he can answer the questions correctly, follow him. So the answers to these questions came in Revelation, and there are details which are interesting and important, have lessons, but we are not going to get into that. The answers to the first 2 questions were placed in Surah Al-Kahf, and the answer to the 3rd question was placed in Surah Bani Israel. For tonight's topic, 2nd question is valid, asking about the mighty traveler who traveled to the east and west confines of the earth, asking about his 2 journeys. So the response came in Surah Al-Kahf, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُم مِّنْهُ ذِكْرًا. They ask you about Dhul Qarnayn, tell them I'm going to tell you something about it. Then the Revelation names the mighty traveler, Dhul Qarnayn, right? وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ. First, names the traveler, not just a mighty traveler. The name was not supplied by the rabbis. Okay. And then the surah continues to say, behold, we established him in this earth, with power and means and ways, means resources, so that he may journey there and he can travel therein to accomplish whatever he wanted to accomplish. This is the divine confidence in Zulqarnain that Surah Al-Kahf mentions, right? And Zulqarnain's kingdom was an unchallenged superpower of his time. It was a great power of his time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him all the means to go travel, and his mission statement is there in Surah Al-Kahf. What did Zulqarnain want to accomplish? Adl. He wanted to punish the oppressors and help and bring ease to the oppressed, the weak, and the righteous people. So that was his mission statement, you can say. So he went on his way, he journeyed to pursue these objectives. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, as the surah says, until he came to a place of setting sun. So he traveled in a westward direction, and he noticed the sun setting into a large body of dark water. It was dark water. Okay? And there nearby he found a people. And then surah mentions a divine conversation. Zulqarnain was told, it says, Zulqarnain, you have the authority. You either punish them or treat them kindly. So Zulqarnain responds, I will punish the oppressors, and when they go to meet their Lord, he will punish them further. But I'll use my resources, my power, to bring ease to the oppressed and the weak and the righteous people. Then he continued his journey to pursue his objectives. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, as the surah says, until he came to the place of rising sun. The implication is that he came to another place where sun was rising to another body of water. The eastern confine of the earth, the east end. Okay? And there he found a people for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not provided a covering. لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُم مِّن دُونِهَا سِتْرًا كَذَلِكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not provide them any covering, no sitr, right? And that's the way it was, كذلك. We don't have many details from the Quran on this one. You see, when he was in the west end by the place of the setting sun, there was a conversation and he explained what he is going to do with his power to establish adl, to punish the oppressors, etc. That is merely narrated. But here we do not know what transpired with these people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the way he handled the situation here. وَقَدْ أَحَطْنَا بِمَا لَدَيْهِ خُبْرًا. We do not know what transpired. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we surrounded him, we immersed him, we encompassed, وَأَحَطْنَا, surrounded him, his handling of the situation, by our knowledge, with our knowledge. Only divine praise can be expressed with such magnificent words. We don't know what happened. So that leads us to an interpretation. This is an interpretation, ta'wil. That perhaps these people were a primitive people. That they didn't have clothes. They were a primitive people. And Zulqarnain, and Allah knows best. When we take an interpretation of ta'wil, we say Allah knows best. And he left them undisturbed, unmolested. He did not try to civilize them, as has happened later on in a later age. People try to civilize the native peoples of various continents. So he wisely and compassionately left them undisturbed. That's all. We don't have more details. And to the best of our understanding, there is no further expansion of this particular event in a hadith. Then he marched, continued, ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, to pursue his objectives. And he traveled in a third direction, on a third journey. Remember, the rabbis had asked about 2 journeys. So he traveled a 3rd journey, right? Until he reached a pass between 2 mountain barriers. Pass between 2 mountain barriers, because you can think of it as a mountain, a narrow pass, very narrow pass, another mountain, or a mountain range with a crack in there, a pass in there, a narrow pass in there. He came to that place and he came across other people there. These people could not understand the language of the superpower of their time. لا يكادون يفقهون قولا. There was no communication. They couldn't understand. They couldn't communicate. So perhaps this was not the problem on the east and west end. The first 2 journeys, this was not the problem. So perhaps these people were isolated, or their language, the construct or the origin of their language came from sources other than the sources of the language that was in that part of the world. So they may have been isolated. The language originated and grew in isolation of other people in that part of the world. But eventually we know they were able to communicate, right? And when they were able to communicate, what did they say? قالوا يا ذا القرنين. What did they say? إن يأجوج ومأجوج إن يأجوج ومأجوج مفسدون في الأرض. They said, oh, Dhul Qarnayn, Ya'juj and Ma'juj are corrupting and thereby destroying the land. So maybe we can raise some taxes, we can pay you some taxes or raise a tribute for you, so you can build us a barrier to protect us from them. They are coming and corrupting the land, right? Dhul Qarnayn, he declined the tribute. He said he does not want any tribute or taxes. He said he was very secure in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided him. But he says, I can do something, I can build you a barrier if you help me with manpower, bring me manpower, help me with manpower. And I'll build you a radma. And they said, right? They asked for sadda. A radma is something bigger, like a dam, something more solid. He said, bring me irons, bring me blocks of iron. Atuni zubar al-hadid, bring me blocks of iron, ingots as it's called in English language. And, start filling up the barrier, the pass. Fill up the space between sadafain, baina sadafain. Sadafain, in Arabic, most of the people know, it's a pair, right? Plural, you have a pair, and then you have multiple in Arabic, right? Like you say marra, who is 1, marratain is 2, and marrad, a 3rd. So, sadafain, if you say, this is the 2 sides of a seashell. So if you look at a seashell, keep your hands like this, seashell with the mouth open on top is joined at the bottom. And he said, you fill up the gap in the sadafain. This is a barrier which, at the bottom of which, if you stood and looked up, you look like you are at the bottom of a giant seashell by the sadafain, right? And he says, once the gap was filled, he says, light a fire and work your bellows. You know what bellows are? Bellows are used to provide air, oxygen. Ironsmith uses it. It's like it's got an accordion-like movement, and you blow, just like blowing with your mouth if you want to kindle a fire or something. I said, work your bellows, and they started a fire. And when the iron blocks were hot and were glowing red hot, okay, at that time, what happens when they are red hot? They will start fusing together into one homogeneous mass or a barrier, right? At that time, he says, and he asked for molten copper to pour on top of it. Why molten copper? We know that from basic metallurgy that you pour copper on top of iron to protect it from oxygen, from rusting. So this barrier will have a longer life. And when this barrier was complete, he says, Dhul Qarnayn said, this is a mercy from my Lord. But when the time appointed by my Lord comes, this barrier will be reduced to ruins, it will collapse. And then my Lord's promise would have come true. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. my Lord's promise. So he was talking about a momentous promise, not by the way incident, something major on the stage of history in the life of mankind as a whole, something major. As such, when the barrier was built, Yajuj and Majuj were unable to scale it, and they were unable to penetrate the barrier, right? And as a consequence, mankind was safe from their fasad. And this would continue until the barrier collapses, and then mankind would be overwhelmed with their fasad. So this was our first encounter with Yajuj and Majuj in our talk so far. And this happened on the third journey of Dhul-Qarnayn. Right? Notice at this time, the rabbis had asked them about 2 journeys. So the question was very cleverly posed, very cleverly posed. And Quran came back and gave a description of 3 journeys. What the rabbis really wanted to know if this man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knew about Yajuj and Majuj. That was the target of the questions. If he knew about Yajuj and Majuj. And that's why Quran very pointedly responds, right? وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ, they ask about Dhul Qarnayn. قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُم مِّنْهُ ذِكْرًا. Tell them, I'm going to tell you something about it. So it's a pointed response, rather. And so, having seen this background, let's look at what kind of creatures Yajuj and Majuj are. When I was growing up, we had heard various narratives that Yajuj and Majuj are some strange creatures. Maybe someday come out from the belly of the earth, or Allah knows from where, and bite us and do whatever, those kinds of. But these were unsubstantiated things. These are narratives that have been floating. I don't know how many of you heard such stories that there are some strange creatures in the belly of the earth, etc. I'm not alone. So, alhamdulillah. And so, we will try to analyze this. Surah Al-Kahf says, the Quran says, Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. At a minimum, what that means is that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are capable of fasad. Fasad is a crime as well as a sin. And the punishment for fasad, if you have to adjudicate a matter of fasad, is what? It could be banishment from the land, or in the worst case, it could be cutting off of an arm and a leg from the opposite sides and then crucifying. This is from the Quran. We know this, right? And fasad is also a sin. So they are capable of sin, they are capable of fasad. Who is capable of sin? In order to commit a sin, you must have a self-directed will, an ability to choose. For example, the Malaika, Yajuj and Majuj cannot be from angels. They're out. Because the Malaika, they have no ability to choose. They are incapable of committing sin. يَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. I mean, they do what they are told. So Malaika is out as an option. Yajuj and Majuj cannot be from angels, right? And angels couldn't commit fasad. I mean, but we are going through a logical argument. That's why we are presenting one by one different cases. That leaves from Allah's creation. We know of 2 creations that have self-directed will and can commit sins. Jinn and insan. That's right. Humans. So, but then an interesting thing, the barrier cannot contain jinn. Jinns do not live in our dimension of time and space. That barrier couldn't stop jinns. So it must be humans. And so we have arrived at this conclusion without referring to a hadith so far, simply pondering over one ayah of Surah Al-Kahf, that Yajuj and Majuj positively identified as human beings, right? But then you could have applied even a rational thinking over here, is that the people who complained to Dhul Qarnayn said, the Yajuj and Majuj come and commit fasad. Are they jinns? Meaning, what are they complaining about? That we hear these invisible things that come, they are not in our dimension, but they come and then we hear the rustling of the wind and fasad happens. No, fasad is a human reality in terms of real ground realities. It's a crime, it's a sin, etc. So, but that's rational thinking, but we have shown from the Quran itself that they are human beings, right? Let's see, using our methodology, is there any support from hadith to that expands our knowledge? And we said we'll take the hadith which are in harmony with what we understand from the Quran. So let's examine. There's a hadith, and this one is from Bukhari, and the scenario is Judgment Day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call upon his slave, our father, Adam alayhi salam, and will say, take out for the hellfire those who are destined for hellfire. Take out from your entire progeny, those whose destination is hellfire. Adam alayhi salam asked, who are they? Or how many are they? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, out of every 1,000, take out 999 for hellfire and 1 for Jannah. When the companions of Prophet ﷺ heard this, they were overtaken by grief and fear. Prophet ﷺ consoled them. He said, do not grieve, that 1 for Jannah will be from you, and the 999 will be from Ahlu Yajuj and Majuj. There, we have an evidence from Hadith. Right now, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say to Adam? Take out from your entire progeny. What is Adam's progeny called? Banu Adam. What is the English word for Banu Adam? Human beings. So this is sitting right there in plain sight in a book of Hadith, which is probably most used. Yet we have these prevalent misconceptions. So, having addressed that question with what kind of creatures they are, let's look at the question, why Zulqarnain, despite all his power, did not punish them. He didn't go after them. Zulqarnain was the unchallenged superpower of his time. He traveled everywhere, punishing the oppressor. That was his mission statement. I said, you find that from Surah Al-Kahf. Zulqarnain did not go after them because Zulqarnain knew it was not his cup of tea. It was not his cup of tea. Zulqarnain knew that it was the will of his Lord that Yajuj and Majuj could not be defeated or vanquished by man. That's why he did not go after him. After Yajuj and Majuj. So the profile that emerges from the Quran itself about Yajuj and Majuj is that they possess extraordinary military power and other powers. So they possess extraordinary military power, and there's no rival or no combination of rivals could challenge them, could defeat them. The best that Zulqarnain could do was to build a barrier and contain them. He didn't go after them to beat them. No, he did not. And so there is support for this from Hadith. And this is Hadith Qudsi from Sahih Muslim. And this is in relation to Yajuj and Majuj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outside of the Quran. Hadith Qudsi. Speech of Allah outside of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reported to have said, I have created slaves of mine, referring to Yajuj. I have created slaves of mine that none but I can wage war on, that none but I can destroy. There it is, in support of what we concluded from the Quran, what we learned from the Quran. So the implication here is quite ominous, that when they are released into mankind, they will be wielding a unique military power and taking control of the world, and they will be committing their fasad all over. They'll project power, and no group of rivals, righteous rivals, will be able to defeat them. But there's perhaps a lesson that they might be able to take steps to protect them or contain contain the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the impact. So now we want to know, where is this location geographically where Dhul-Qarnayn on his third journey built this barrier, where the Ya'juj and Ma'juj were confined. Okay, in order to identify the location, we need to identify on the earth two large bodies of water, right? Place of setting sun and place of rising sun, such that the large body of water to the west is dark. Ainin Hamia, as Surah says, is dark, and the body to the east is not dark. Another large body of water, right? And somewhere in between in the geography, you must have mountain barriers with a narrow pass. This is the description, right? If we go with this description, look at the map or look at Google Earth or whatever, this information is sufficient. It's sufficient to identify the location of the place. But we will look at some hadiths before we actually look at the location geographically. We have some slides to that effect. There's this hadith from Sahih Muslim. Ya'juj and Ma'juj will walk till they reach the mountain of Khamr or Khamar. And this mountain is in Bayt al-Maqdis. Rasulullah said, this is in Sahih Muslim. So for the first time now in our talk, we established a link between Ya'juj and Ma'juj and Al-Quds. Okay. Another hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, when first of them will pass by, they'll pass by the Sea of Galilee, known as Lake Tiberias, Lake Tiberias. I think the Israelis call it Lake Kinneret, I believe. Sea of Galilee. And when the last of them passes, he will say there used to be water here. So they'll be consuming a lot of water. We will go into interpretation of this in some other talks, in future talks. But the point is, they will be passing Sea of Galilee, and we know that destination is Jerusalem, from the first hadith we saw. So this implies a north to south movement. So if we have to look at a location where they were confined, where they came from, we have to look somewhere north of the Holy Land. Okay, and I'll draw your attention to this this map here. For example, this is the Sea of Galilee. From the water comes from the Golan Heights, I believe, accumulates there. And you have Jerusalem down here. So this is if they are passing by Sea of Galilee and coming to Jerusalem, this generally north to south movement, right? So just to make that point, let's go now. For some reason I'm not able to go to the next slide. Okay, here's the next slide. Alhamdulillah. If you look, is there a large body of water which is dark north of the Holy Land? Yeah, it's called Black Sea. Then the reason it's called Black Sea, because this water appears dark and turbid. Why does the water of Black Sea appear black or dark? Because the salt level, the salinity level in this body of water is low. And that promotes algae growth, and it's a lot of algae. And the presence of that algae makes the water appear dark, right? So that's to the west over here. This is the Black Sea. And here to the east, you have the Caspian Sea. So the place of setting sun here and the place of rising sun over here. What's important is that we need to locate in that geography a stretch of mountain, two mountain barriers, or a stretch of mountain or mountain range, right? And sure enough, there is a mountain range that is stretching from one sea to the other. It's called the Caucasus Mountains. And once we locate the mountains, we need to locate, this Caucasus Mountains actually separates Europe from Asia. It's, to the north is Russia, the Europe part, south is Asia. And this, now we need to look at, is there a pass? Is there one solitary single pass in there? And sure enough, there is. And that pass today is a roadway or highway today in our time. It's called the Georgian Military Highway. This was built by the Russians in the 19th century and is the only passage, the only link today that connects the area south of the Caucasus with the area north of the Caucasus. Even today, that's the only link if you have to go through the Caucasus. This road was named as Georgian Military Highway by Tsar Alexander I. And this route is known to have existed for a long time, since 1st or 2nd century BC. This road today, this pass, the road going through that pass today is about more than 130 miles long today. It's a spectacular road winding through those mountains, through the narrow passes. In some places, at a place called Krastovi Pass, the mountains on your sides rise up 7,000 feet. As you come close to the Russian border, close to the village of Kazbegi, there's Mount Kazbegi there, that is 16,000 feet high. So these are mighty mountains. Just to get an idea, 16,000 feet, the altitude above sea level of the surface of Lake Tahoe is about 6,000 feet. Okay, so these are 16,000 feet. So these are mighty mountains. Another location on this pass is known as Daryal Gorge. This is a very narrow gorge where the cliffs on each side are granite cliffs, granite, maybe our sisters know because of the kitchen counter, right? Everybody wants a granite counter. It's a very hard stone. These are granite cliffs which go up 5,000 feet high. They're 5,000 feet. And the road there has actually had to be cut as a shelf on the granite. It would cut like a shelf, then a vehicle could pass. So it was that narrow. And this place, Daryal Gorge, had been fortified for a long time. 2nd century BC, roughly, before the time of Sayyidina Isa, 150 years or so. That's what's known. Perhaps it has existed even before then. And even today you can find the ruins of a very ancient fortress lying there. So we identified the location where they were confined now geographically, obtaining the information from the Quran and substantiating it from the information we obtained from the Hadith. Now the big question, have they been released yet? Everybody wants to know, have they been released yet, right? So we go to our principal source, to the Quran. Excuse me. And we'll begin with verse number 95 of Surah Al-Anbiya. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَىٰ قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and there's a ban, this is a divinely placed ban on the people of a town that we destroyed, that they cannot return to claim the town. They cannot come to return the qaryah. This is a divinely placed ban. But there is a caveat built into the ayah that says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Until and unless Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released and they descend from all heights, meaning they're spread in all directions or they occupy all centers of power. So there are two conditions for the return of those people who had been banned from a town to return to that town, that Ya'juj and Ma'juj must be released and they must become powerful, they must spread in all directions. These are the two conditions, right? That means it will be Ya'juj and Ma'juj who will be bringing them to that town, to that land, against or in violation or in defiance of the divine decree. So this point is important to understand. Which town? Which town is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about? Yes, indeed. It is Jerusalem, and we find proof from the Quran. So in Surah Bani Israel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, this is from the first 7 or 8 ayahs. It says that we had informed Bani Israel, we foretold them that they will commit fasad, serious fasad, twice. وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ فِي الْكِتَابِ لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ. Twice you will commit fasad. And first time when they committed this, when the Quran says, and we send our bondsmen or slaves who wrought havoc on them. What does it refer to? It refers to the time when the Babylonian Empire from Babel, the empire of Babylon, they attacked Holy Land, they destroyed Jerusalem, they destroyed the Masjid of Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, and they emptied the Holy Land of all Banu Israel. They took them lock, stock and barrel, the whole Jama'ah, marched them to Babylon, to Iraq. And in the Jewish tradition, this is known as the Babylonian exile. Okay. And then the Quran says we allowed them to prevail, they came back. So they were there in exile for about a century or so, and then the Persians were victorious for Babylonian Empire, and they brought the Banu Israel back to Holy Land. Where they came, they flourished for a few hundred years. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was kind, merciful to them, etc. But then Quran says when the second time they committed fasad, and we'll come into this narrative in one of the other talks, because it's important for learning another subject related to end times. But here we just concentrate on the subject of Yajuj and Majuj. So second time when they committed a fasad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we sent new enemies against them, who utterly disgraced them and humiliated them. But what did they do? They didn't take the whole Jama'ah out to another place. This time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributed them, cut them into bits and pieces and scattered them all around. This is what happened. And the second one was by the Romans. It was not at the hands of the Babylonians. It was at the hands of Romans. And if you examine the entire body of ahadith related to Yajuj and Majuj, if you look at all the ahadith, right, is there any town mentioned there by name? And there's only one town mentioned there, Bayt al-Maqdis, which is Al-Quds, Jerusalem. Only one town. So we conclude from this that those people were Banu Israel and the town was Jerusalem. So we're talking about Holy Land over here, right? Obviously now there is a question staring us in the face. A question, a glaring question is staring us in the face, which is, have Banu Israel returned to Holy Land? Right. Have they returned to Holy Land? And then you don't have to read newspapers. You don't have to be an astute observer of unfolding events on the world stage to know that they not only have returned, but they have been dominating the land around them for what, more than 6 decades now. We know that, right? They have come. But how come Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had placed a ban on them and said they cannot come? They cannot return unless in defiance of the divine decree, Yajuj and Majuj, who are released and become powerful when they are, min kulli hadabin yansilun, that they're released and they become powerful. When these two conditions are met, so we ask ourselves, are we waiting to find out from TV news when they'll be released? This is something to think about. Okay, they have already been released a long time ago. This support from hadith, and if time permits, we can cover it in Q&A, we'll see, inshallah. According to Dr. Tammam Adi, who is a semanticist specializing in the classic Arabic, the language of the Quran, He says there are three realizations of this phrase, min kulli hadabin yansilun. He writes that there are three realizations. Number one, first realization is that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj have interbred, like breeding of cattle, interbred with the royal families and the ruling elites of around the world. That's one realization. Second realization is that they have infiltrated every organization. Hadab in Arabic also means a raised structure. And therefore an organization. It could be a military headquarters, parliament, government buildings, and an organization's building. Therefore, he said this is a realization that they have infiltrated our organization. That's one of the realizations. And the third is like min kulli hadabin yansilun, that they are rushing down every hill. What does that mean? He says it means they will be launching attacks everywhere. These are the three realizations. So let's look at the return of Banu Israel. The details of this, the actual story of how Banu Israel's return happened in terms of world's historical events, inshallah, if Allah permits us to get together again, we'll cover in one of the talks. It's not covered in our education series, but inshallah, if we have time, we can cover. That is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the story. But we'll just see when it became possible, briefly. In 1917, a British army, commanded by a British general, which had many soldiers from British India, many of them Muslims, and also had an Arab army assembled with the help of Lawrence of Arabia, and etc., right? Who together snatched Jerusalem and the Holy Land from the Ottoman Khilafah, from the Ottoman Caliphate, right? At that time, the commanding general of that British army, General Allenby, there's a bridge named after him, Allenby Bridge, if you cross to West Bank. I don't know if it's still named, and it's called Allenby Bridge. So that bridge exists, it's named after him. He made a comment that today the Crusades have come to an end. As if he was giving concluding remarks or summary of the entire objective of Crusades that had actually started nearly 1,000 years before then, right? These were and then we'll expand on this in the talk when we talk about the actual events, inshallah, if we arrange that. So this was in 1917. This is what transpired, right? I know of one person who, when he saw, nearly 100 years ago, right, 1917 or 98 years ago, when he saw this, he said, this is the manifestation of that ayah in Surah Al-Anbiya. Anybody knows who that person was? Anybody from India or Pakistan? One person who saw in 1917 that this is the work of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. He was an intellectual. It was Iqbal, yes. And so Iqbal, in his poetry collection called Bange Dara, there's a section called Zarifan. They say, for those, I'm going to quote in Urdu, and then I'll translate for those who do not know Urdu. Khul gaye Ya'juj aur Ma'juj ke lashkar tamam, chashme Muslim dekh le tafsir harfe yansilun. He said, the forces of Ya'juj and Ma'juj have overwhelmed. O Muslim, look, this is the manifestation of that verse number 95 of Surah Al-Anbiya, min kulli hadabin yansilun. So now we have time, don't we? We have time, let me know if I'm going over time. So what does the name Zulqarnain mean, because we want to complete the story. We are taking simple questions and we are trying to get simple answers to bring clarity so that we are no longer confused. We are approaching this very methodically, inshallah. So what does the name Zulqarnain mean, and who was Zulqarnain? So there has been a perception, and I have read about this perception. There's a narrative that Alexander the Great was Zulqarnain. Now, this is unfortunate. Alexander the Great was a polytheist. His religion was Greek polytheism. And according to Greek polytheism, there are many gods. And the gods reside at the top of Mount Olympus in Greece. And sometimes the gods come down. And then they marry among humans, or they pair with women, and they have demigods and demigoddesses, half god, half human, etc. So the suggestion that Alexander the Great, maybe the suggestion came because he conquered a lot of land. He went and he could do whatever he wanted to do. So it seemed, until he got so frustrated in India, right? He couldn't go further. But this suggestion that he could be is absurd. It's actually nonsense. He couldn't be. We know the character of Zulqarnain from Surah Al-Kahf. Right? Now, the Arabic word the qarnain, it means two qarns, we said, a pair, right? Qarnain. Qarn can mean horn, as in horn, or it can mean an age, meaning an epoch, a long period of time. That two meanings possible, right? And some narratives refer to him as the one with two horns. And maybe this narrative came about because of the perception, and that or speculation maybe was inspired by some speculation that perhaps Zulqarnain was a Nordic king, from the northern Europe, from Norway, Sweden, etc., a warrior from there. Because in ancient days, the Nordic warriors, when they went into battle, they donned a headgear which had horns made on it, perhaps to terrify their opponents, etc. This was their battle gear, so to speak. But the horns, it does not convey anything profound about him. The one with two horns does not convey. And Allah knows best. So here's a possible interpretation over here, is that the Quran refers to him as the man of two ages, of the two ages, Dhul Qarnain, the man whose story links or contrasts two ages. One age is his age, when unchallenged power is used to protect the oppressed and punish the oppressors, as opposed to another age, the last age to come, where unchallenged power will be used to cause bloodshed, to spread fasad, and to commit murders, mass murders. One was his age, where he used his unchallenged power to protect the primitive people, respect them compassionately, and leave them alone, unmolested, undisturbed. Contrast that with another age where people will manipulate the primitive people, take away their land, they'll try to civilize them, and try to build special reservations for them or something like that. The history of Australia and Western Hemisphere is full of it, right? And this sounds like a more logical meaning. And when we do an interpretation, we always say Allah knows best, But there is another problem with assuming that the meaning could be qarn, which is, I think, a bigger problem, is that qarn is not used exclusively in Surah Al-Kahf. It appears in numerous places in the Quran. And in every single instance where it appears, it has been used to mean an age, an epoch, not to mean horn. So that's another point that lends weight, possibly, to the interpretation that this Zulqarnain means of the two ages. Now, we're coming to the concluding part of it, where we are going to give the definition of fasad. Why? We said, Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. So Dr. Tammam Adi, who is the semanticist of the language, he has extracted the various kinds of fasad described in Quran, defined in Quran. But this is by no means an exhaustive list. So we'll just go through that. So there's religious fasad. This is from Surah Al-Baqarah. When a group of people, they blatantly abandon a covenant that they have made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means they have made a covenant and then they change their scriptures, they break their own laws, etc. after making the covenant. This has been defined as fasad. Okay. Then there is family ties fasad also in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is tearing of family ties, separating parents from children, wives from husband, brothers from each other. This is also defined as fasad in Surah Al-Baqarah. Then there is genocidal fasad, which is mass murder. يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. Plural, shedding of all blood. That's fasad. Then there's agricultural fasad. لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا وَيُهْلِكَ الْحَرْث. This is agricultural fasad. And according to Dr. Adi, he says this covers the systematic disruption and ruining of not just crops but the entire agricultural system through genetic modification or insertion of poisons into the seeds and whatnot. And this is also from Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay. And if we have time permitting, I can give you an actual illustration of agricultural fasad in India, an example of that. Then you have the fasad to offspring. Yuhlik al-harsh wan nasl, it continues, right? This is the systematic destruction of human reproductive system, murder of children. This is Al-Baqarah. Then there's economic fasad in Surah Al-A'raf. La tabkhasu an-nasa ashya'ahum. Do not diminish the value of possessions of people. Okay, this has been defined as fasad. This appears in 2 other locations in the Quran also. And then there is the fasad of sodomy, which is social acceptance of homosexual lifestyle. So Dr. Adi says that Yajuj and Majuj have been called mufsiduna fil ard, but no fasad has been particularly ascribed to them. So what that means is that Yajuj and Majuj are people whose collective profession, whose collective lifestyle is creation, promotion, and spread of fasad. All kinds of fasad, no exceptions. Okay. This is his explanation. So before the concluding remark, I want to go through the other slides, which I forgot to. So we saw the 2 seas, right? Here is a picture of the Darial Gorge in that pass. Okay, you can see if you look there why it was called Sadafain. And to give you an idea, I've got 2 more slides. This is just to, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This picture was taken in 1874, I believe. This particular picture. Then this is a painting. When painters painted, they painted very accurately. You can see a little caravan traveling over here at the bottom of the gorge, the same gorge. This is also painting. It's from 1870s. Okay. And here's another picture. You can tell. So pictorially, you get an idea what it was. So now, finally, as we are concluding, let's ask ourselves: are all of these types of fasad happening in the world today? Have Banu Israel returned to Holy Land? And if we're still waiting for their release, the release of Yajuj and Majuj, then aren't we in a state of slumber? Aren't we in a state of ghafla? That's the question we need to ponder upon. You see, at this time, perhaps the most important subject we should study, we can study, is the study of the last age. But unfortunately, this subject is not learned, not taught, not discussed as much. And so we'll live there, inshallah. We can take questions either now or afterwards, depending on how the Imam or Masjid management prefers. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah.